This is Predictive Services meteorologist Chuck Maxwell with the 2013 Fire Season Considerations and Outlook issued by SWIC Predictive Services. This was created on January 15th, 2013. And following our consistent methodology now, looking at our seasonal fire potential factors, we'll be looking here and considering drought, the fine fuels conditions, seasonal temperature and precipitation, the spring and early summer weather patterns, and the nature of the summer monsoon. As we take a look at the drought factor for fire season 2013, over here on the left we're looking at the drought monitor in the upper left, current conditions, and then the forecast drought outlook going through the spring. Bottom line is we're in severe or worse long-term drought ongoing across much of the region. Drought is a little bit less severe over portions of the Arizona high country, as you can see on the map up in this vicinity, and also parts of southwest Texas. But the drought outlook calls for drought to persist and/or become more widespread through the spring. At this point, long-term drought and drought impacts are pretty much a given in our outlook with regard to our methodology. The best we can hope for is temporary mitigation of drought impacts with any wetter periods we might see. The bottom line is we'll be seeing continued increased volatility during fire season due to drought impacts. Considering the fine fuel regime for fire season 2013, well, overall long-term drought means not a lot of excessive continuous fine fuels in general. A wetter monsoon over this past summer west of the Continental Divide led to more normal or better fine fuels across this vicinity, across the western part of the region, though there probably is some compaction along the Mogollon Rim where we had some snow. And we have a similar situation in southwest Texas with regard to enhanced fine fuels due to some moisture down in that area. Overall, fine fuels are below average across the entire eastern plains and rangeland areas, which is important because that is the predominant fuel type there. And we're looking for more field reports and information to validate and update our outlooks as we go forward. If you have anything, please contact us. Now let's start taking a look at the seasonal temperature and precipitation factors. We'll start by looking back at this past December. Over here on the left, we're looking at temperature on the upper left and precipitation anomalies in the lower left. These cool colors here, the green and blues, mean it was a cold December period here, start of the winter, with a pretty mixed precipitation signal if you look down towards the bottom. We had some above normal precipitation across some of Arizona and some of the far southeast parts of the area, and a pretty good swath of little or no precipitation in between, but overall just kind of a mess down here, kind of a mosaic of conditions. Overall, this has had little impact on drought or fine fuels growth at all. The main impact is probably some, and I emphasize some, fine fuels compaction in the mountain areas. The snowpack signal as of right now is quite mixed. We have areas with above normal and below normal, but overall, we're looking at below normal conditions at the higher elevations. Looking ahead to the January-February outlook for temperature and precipitation for the remainder of the winter time period. This overall outlook is influenced by what we call La Nada, basically an ENSO neutral signal, neither a La Nina or an El Nino, which is a strong signal to help us predict this. So influenced by these conditions, we're looking for a west coast upper level ridge and kind of a Great Lakes trough pattern to be persistent. We have potential lower variability through this period and a higher confidence outlook. Looks like the pattern is going to stay put at least for the next 60 days. This is an overall dry signal. If you look down at the precipitation map here, any of the warm colors mean dryness, with some fluctuating temperatures possibly averaging slightly below normal. You see the temperature map shows a signal for coolness. This probably means is we're going to see alternating periods of warmth and some cold that may average out just about normal or slightly below. And also we're looking at some potentially warmer conditions across the far east, probably due to a downslope wind signal we get when we have westerly winds come across with storms moving across the Four Corners during this time period. As we step forward into the springtime period, March through May, looking at potential temperature and precipitation anomalies. We're looking for a slight pattern shift in this time period, which should lead to some higher variability and lower confidence compared to the wintertime outlook. Overall, again, dry, if you look at the precipitation signal here, dry pattern overall continuing with a tendency for some coolness up here with these colors across the west and some warmth across the east. Again, we're looking for more variability. This will be a variable pattern. This could bring significant moisture into both the northwest and southeast portions of the area, with sustained dryness most likely in between. If you can kind of imagine with some variability here, some of this moisture that's is forecast for California to be moved into western Arizona, and some which is over here in Texas may be drawn up into the far southeast part of the area. So those areas may see a little bit better conditions than are depicted here, but most likely someplace across the whole middle of the region here will remain the driest overall. We're looking for the potential for the strong western U.S. trough to be persistent. This would point towards consistently cool conditions across the far west if this were to work out, and intermittently breezy to windy conditions with downslope winds across the east. So not quite the blazing sustained winds of 2011, perhaps more of a mix like we saw in 2012. Taking a look ahead for the spring and early summer weather patterns and looking at the potential jet stream pattern, looking at kind of a split flow of jet stream suggested, with storm systems tending to pass north of the region or slow and drop southwards towards the Baja. So it's pretty difficult to depict here. This just shows the mean trough position for the whole time period. We'd expect some of these lows to drop in this vicinity here and some to skirt on by to our north with potentially dramatically different impacts. Still, overall, this should be a dry period. Digging a bit deeper into this, so the trend is towards higher variability and lower confidence with this pattern through the spring into early summer based on the variance of the potential west coast trough. So the two most likely solutions with the pattern we showed you on the prior slide there, it was looking at a more northern track depicted over here on the left or a more southern track on the right. Well, this more northern track here would result in drier, cooler overall conditions with warm and dry conditions probably in the downslope regime over here in the eastern part of the region. But overall moisture here would be staying mostly to the north and across the higher terrain here. This would be a pretty dry, windy signal for most of the region, especially south and east. However, we're going to see variance in this pattern, and one of these variances we're expecting to see is these lows digging south towards the Baja. This brings quite a different impact, because here we're drawing moisture up both from the Pacific and the Gulf of Mexico, so we could actually see some beneficial moisture out of this if this actually works out. Still, we'd expect to see an area in between of some pretty dry, windy conditions. So most likely overall, at the very least, the central part of the region here should probably remain on the drier side, regardless of what actually occurs to the east and west over time. So probably higher confidence in that area for sustained dryness. Glimpsing ahead towards the monsoon. Again, we're looking at some stylized patterns here based on similar past years. And this, again, we're looking at very low confidence in the solution because we don't really have an El Nino or La Nina to work with, and those give us some predictability. It's so far out in time, and the monsoon's a very difficult thing to predict anyhow. So despite the fact this overall pattern would not be all that usual, usually the high is more centered down over the southwest or moves up into the Great Basin occasionally, this pattern would yield a tendency for increased precipitation across northeast New Mexico, eastward into Texas, and across central and western Arizona into parts of southern California. Basically, moisture would be drawn from east to west across the area here, making it potentially pretty wet if this high indeed actually does become centered way up over western Montana. And just another note here, the sooner we lose the influence of southern track systems in the spring, those kind of cooler, wetter systems, the earlier and better the potential monsoon outcome is. So to summarize these factors, all of them together, for drought, bottom line, severe and ongoing. We're looking for increased volatility overall with generally decreased potential in fine fuel regimes and increased potential in higher terrain and heavier fuels, and this is going to stay with us for the foreseeable future. In terms of fine fuels, normal or potentially slightly above normal west of the Continental Divide and also across portions of southwest Texas, with some areas of compaction in the mountains due to snow. Otherwise, we're looking at below normal fine fuels. In terms of seasonal temperature and precipitation, La Nada influenced trend for overall dry conditions through the winter and spring, but with mixed fluctuating temperature signal. Greater variability and uncertainty is expected in the spring with some moisture possible into the northwest and southwest portions of the region. Overall, though, this is a dry signal. For the spring and early summer weather pattern, we're looking for a mean western trough with varying northern and southern stream storm tracks offering almost opposing impacts. So we'll see the potential for a few wet spring storms. We'll have to hope for that. Overall, no widespread areas likely to see consistently good or bad conditions. Exception to that may be what we expect to be some fairly sustained dryness across the central portion of the region, but even that could change. And again, for the monsoon, we're not seeing much of a signal at this point. The only thing we really offer is that the sooner it warms up in the spring, the earlier and stronger the monsoon tends to be. So overall, we're not producing a graphic because it's so tough to summarize the seasonal outlook at this time with no large areas of obvious focus. The few things we can say are that we're going to see less fine fuels across the eastern plains and rangelands, when that means generally lower fire potential there. And drought will continue to promote never-before-seen fire behavior and rapid drying responses and heavier fuels after any precipitation, causing generally increased fire potential over the higher terrain area-wide. A fire potential graphic and more detail and certainty is to be expected with subsequent monthly outlooks. This concludes the preliminary seasonal outlook for 2013. Please contact myself, Chuck Maxwell, at cmaxwell@fs.fed.us or 505-842-3419 with any questions, comments, or concerns.